This movie review for The Living Daylights has spoilers. For week 15 of my James Bond weekly movie marathon, you'd watch the 15th film in the franchise. That film is The Living Daylights. My rating for The Living Daylights is a 3 out of 5, and here's why. The Living Daylights, released in 1987, it's directed by John Glenn, and it stars Timothy Dalton as James Bond, his first James Bond movie. It also stars Miriam D'Abo, Jerome Crabbe, and Joe Don Baker. Not only there's a new actor playing James Bond in this movie, but there's also a new actress playing Miss Moneypenny with Caroline Bliss. In The Living Daylights, they wanted to make a reveal for the new actor playing Bond in the movie, although you get to see him in the gun barrel sequence in the beginning. But once the prologue started, they kind of performed ways of the directing to hide his face until the big reveal. In that prologue, M is conducting them on a training mission on the Rock of Gibraltar. Once they land on the Rock of Gibraltar and that fortress, a couple of the 00 agents already met their fate with failing the game, and the other dying by a mysterious killer. James Bond would notice this and investigate himself, and it led into a battle with this killer in the prologue. Again, in the prologue, they wanted to make the big reveal with Timothy Dalton. So after, I believe 004's body was falling from a cliff, it cuts to him, center of the shots, and he turns back and looks. And that's I guess you could call it the first true reveal of the new actor playing James Bond. This title credit sequence, in my opinion, is the worst of them all. The title song by Aha is really great. The title credit sequence itself didn't really flow well with the song. Once again, the song is great. It is very catchy, and after you watch it, you kind of start singing it to yourself. The chorus over and over again, repeating "The Living Daylights." Anyways, still not knowing if there is a connection with what happened in the prologue to the main story, we would see James Bond and an associate working for him trying to get a KGB general to defect over to the West. This was all done while they were in Czechoslovakia. James Bond would notice a shooter trying to kill this General Koskov as he was trying to escape. James Bond would notice that she's not really a sniper, so Bond doesn't end up killing her. And by the way, this girl was a celloist he saw in the concert they were at. With all that, as the movie plays out, it will turn out to be all a ruse. General Koskov wanted to defect over to the West to let the Brits know, especially their spies, about the fact that the new head general, General Pushkin, who took over from General Gogol, was a madman. But like I said, it was all a ruse. General Koskov would end up getting kidnapped again by the KGB and would be taken back to the Soviet side. That ruse was to get the British Secret Service to think that General Pushkin's the enemy when the real enemy is General Koskov himself. Another villain in this movie is Brad Whitaker, a disgraced general who thrives on war and who is a fanatic of generals who are killers. Brad Whitaker is an arms dealer who lives in Tangier, Morocco. There, he worked a deal with General Pushkin to sell him weapons. But General Pushkin, knowing Whitaker's reputation, would decline the sale of the weapons to him. With that, we also find out that General Koskov and Brad Whitaker are working together to provide a lot of money and power in terms of guns. To find out what Brad Whitaker and General Koskov are up to and what plans they have in store, they go along with killing General Pushkin. But with that, James Bond faked the assassination of General Pushkin to make them think he's dead. With that, James Bond and the celloist he was posing to investigate General Koskov, Kara Malovi, they would get kidnapped by General Koskov, his hitman Necros, and go to Afghanistan. There, whilst in Afghanistan, they helped release a head general of a resistance group in Afghanistan fighting against the Soviets. There we would find out that this is all a money and power game, where Brad Whitaker would supply General Koskov and the Soviets with weaponry to fight against this resistance and all other of their wars, as well as Brad Whitaker getting raw opium from this trade with the resistance and the Soviets, and him earning money by, selling these drugs back in the US. Anyways, the movie is a little complicated, but you would get it at the end. Some of the action set pieces, the action scenes in The Living Daylights, they are really over the top. I do like the return of the Aston Martin in this movie. James Bond gets reunited with the Aston Martin, albeit the action sequence was cool. There was all these gadgets to it, but it would be short-lived. Although, like the action sequences being over the top, it did fail on some points, especially with having Kara. They purposely, at the end action sequence in Afghanistan, they purposely had Kara drive up to the plane so she could be with Bond. I mean, she could have stayed at the thing, but I mean, it was kind of like, very over the top and not necessary. They were sliding down the mountainside in a cello, which these enemies are like stormtroopers. They miss every shot, with the exception of the cello getting hit, which is really ridiculous. But with the ridiculous over-the-top action, there is some great action in this movie. Like at the end, where Kara is flying the plane. As she's flying the plane, this cargo net full of the opium falls out from the back, but still attached to the plane with Necros, the hitman for General Koskov, and James Bond were hanging off of it and fighting. It is a really cool action sequences, and it sets up really nicely. That action sequence inspired that same type of thing with Uncharted 3 Drake's Deception, where they had a similar scene to that where you had to play through. With this being Timothy Dalton's first run as James Bond, his acting was great. All the other main actors in this movie portraying their characters acted well. It's just the story as well as the over-the-top action and how they position certain characters in place of that action, especially with Kara. Like, she flew a plane. She's a celloist. She's not an agent. Like, she's just a normal person who plays a cello. I mean, she could shoot a gun, but James Bond obviously knew that she wasn't a sniper anyways. The Living Daylights is a lot of fun, but I find it typical to the other James Bond films. It did showcase Timothy Dalton's acting as James Bond, although the final action sequence between Brad Whitaker and James Bond was actually pretty good. It was kind of like a standoffish type of scenario where James Bond would use Q's gadget of this remote with a whistle sensor to explode a big statue bust to fall on top of Brad and kill him. Anyways, that is my review for The Living Daylights. Next week will be the 16th week of the James Bond movie marathon, which would be the 16th movie of the James Bond franchise, Timothy Dalton's second and final film as James Bond, and that is License to Kill. Please like this video, comment down below what you thought about The Living Daylights. Thank you guys for watching.